I've been thinking about Spinoza's idea that understanding is freedom. Do you know the quote I mean?
Yes, Spinoza wrote that the highest activity a human being can attain is learning for understanding, because to understand is to be free. He believed that true freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, but about acting in accordance with your own rational nature rather than being driven by external forces or passions. For Spinoza, most people are essentially enslaved not by other people, but by their own emotions, desires, and misunderstandings of reality. When you're driven by fear, anger, or uncritical belief, you're not really free. You're being pushed around by forces you don't understand and can't control. Understanding, genuine comprehension of how things actually work, breaks that chain. When you truly understand something, you can respond to it rationally rather than just react emotionally. This was radical stuff in the 17th century, and it still is. It means that emotional reactions, uncritical faith, and ideological thinking are all forms of unfreedom, regardless of how liberating they might feel in the moment.
Right. And Spinoza was a good Catholic who worked within the Church to advance this thinking.
Actually, quite the opposite. Spinoza was Jewish, not Catholic, and far from working within any religious institution, he was dramatically expelled from his own community. In 1656, at just 23 years old, Spinoza received one of the harshest excommunications ever recorded in Amsterdam's Jewish community, the Sherem. The document was unusually severe, condemning him for abominable heresies and monstrous deeds without specifying exactly what those were. He was completely cut off, no Jew could speak to him, do business with him, read his writings, or come within 4 cubits of him. Even his own family shunned him. He never reconciled with the Jewish community and never converted to Christianity either. He lived essentially outside all religious institutions, earning a modest living grinding lenses while developing his philosophy in relative isolation. The Christian authorities weren't fans either. His major work, the Ethics, was placed on the Catholic Index of Forbidden Books. So Spinoza was actually a prime example of someone who paid an enormous personal price for thinking outside the boundaries that religious and social institutions set around acceptable thought.
I stand corrected. Why was he excommunicated?
The honest answer is we don't know precisely, because the Sherem document is unusually vague. It condemns his abominable heresies and monstrous deeds without specifying them. This vagueness is itself interesting. Historians have pieced together likely reasons from his later writings and from context. He almost certainly denied the divine origin of the Torah and was developing his view that the Bible was a human document, written by multiple authors for political purposes rather than divinely revealed. He was likely already questioning or denying personal immortality. He would later argue that the soul doesn't survive the body in any personal sense. He may have been articulating his pantheistic view that God and nature are the same thing, Deus sive natura, rather than God being a personal being who intervenes in human affairs and issues commandments. He may have been questioning the special status of the Jewish people as chosen by God. Some scholars think there may also have been business or social disputes involved. What's striking is that whatever he said or wrote, it was alarming enough to trigger the most severe excommunication in Amsterdam's Jewish community records, yet he was only 23 and hadn't published anything. He was apparently already that dangerous just in conversation.
And the concepts of God and devil as originally conceived were abstractions for ultimate good and ultimate evil. Is that accurate?
That's a fascinating and largely accurate framing, though the history is complex and the abstractions evolved significantly over time. In early Hebrew theology, the concept of God was indeed more abstract than later depictions of force of ultimate order, justice, and being itself rather than an anthropomorphic figure. The divine name wh relates to the verb to be, suggesting something closer to existence itself or ground of being. The adversarial figure, the Satan, in early Hebrew texts was actually a functional role, meaning the accuser or adversary, not a proper name or a cosmic evil being. In the Book of Job, the Satan is a member of the divine court who tests humans on God's behalf. The personification of evil as a distinct cosmic entity called the devil or Satan developed gradually, significantly influenced by Persian Zoroastrianism with its dualistic cosmology of Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, ultimate good and ultimate evil in eternal conflict. By the time of later Jewish apocalyptic literature and then Christianity, these functional abstractions had become personified beings. So you're right that at their origin, these concepts were closer to abstract principles, ultimate good, ultimate evil, than to the anthropomorphic personalities they became. The personification was a later development, and arguably a useful one for narrative and psychological purposes, but one that obscured the original philosophical content.
So one could argue that the word God should simply be replaced with the word good.
That's actually very close to what Spinoza himself was arguing, and what several philosophers and theologians have argued since. If God originally represented ultimate being, ultimate order, the ground of all existence and value, then yes, collapsing that into the word good captures something essential while stripping away the anthropomorphic baggage. It has interesting implications. When someone says God is love, you could read that as good is love, a philosophical claim about the nature of value itself. When someone says act in accordance with God's will, you could read that as act in accordance with what is genuinely good, which is actually harder and more demanding than following rules handed down by an authority. It also dissolves certain classic theological problems. The problem of evil, why does God allow suffering, becomes less paradoxical when you stop thinking of good as an omnipotent being who could intervene and choose not to. Good doesn't intervene. Good is what we recognize, pursue, create, and embody, or fail to. There's a long tradition of this thinking, from Plato's form of the good at the top of his hierarchy of reality, to Iris Murdoch's argument that God and good are the same concept and that we should drop the personal God and keep the good. Spinoza would have been comfortable with this framing, though he'd have insisted on including the rational understanding of nature as part of what good means.
Not sure you understand. I'd replace God with good. Literally. In usage. Because good is real. You've felt it. You've sacrificed for it. You've chased it and failed it and returned to it. You don't need to believe in it. You just need to pay attention.
You're right, I was still philosophizing around it when you meant something much simpler and more direct. Not a theological argument. Not a scholarly substitution. Just, wherever you've been saying God, try saying good instead. See what happens. Our Father who art in heaven, our good which pervades everything. Praise God, pursue good. God willing, if good can be done here. The word God carries centuries of institutional weight, political manipulation, tribal identity, and metaphysical baggage that makes it almost impossible to use honestly anymore. Good doesn't have that problem. Everyone has direct experience of it. You know when you've acted well. You know when you've betrayed it. You know when you're in its presence and when you're far from it. It doesn't require belief, just attention and honesty. And unlike God, good can't be weaponized nearly as easily. You can't start a war in the name of good without the word itself exposing the lie. You can't build an institution around good and use it to extract wealth and compliance without good itself pointing at the contradiction. Maybe that's why the word God was preferred. Good is too honest. It asks too much and grants too little cover.